Boker Tov, Shavua Tov, and welcome to our Parsha class, the Parsha of Noach. We are getting started right as we talk. Okay, we make a bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nihiyah b'dvaroi.
Right.
Okay, coffee. We are ready to begin. So we are in the Parsha of Noach. Noach is the second Parsha in the Chumash, and we did not study the Bereshis last week. We did not study at all last week Sunday because it was Simchas Torah. So we last week during the week we studied the first parsha, the parsha of Genesis, the parsha of Bereshis. We started the Torah anew, and we spoke about the first 10 generations of existence of this world, of creation. 6 days of creation. We spoke about the first Shabbos. We spoke about Adam and Eve. Spoke about the sin of the tree of knowledge. We spoke about the incident of Cain and Hevel, and we kind of zoomed through the first 10 generations of humanity. And here we are now at generation number 10, the generation of Noach. The Parsha is named after him, the Parsha of Noach. Noach was born, and already as he was born, people saw something is different. Something is unique about this child. The Torah in the end of last week's Parsha already says that when Noach was born, they already saw, this will comfort us. This child is not your ordinary child. How do they see this, by the way? As an infant? Because we are told that humans, up until that point, they did not have separated fingers, right? Their hands were like those mittens, right? Those gloves that we used to wear, where slice for your thumb. I'm sorry?
Fins, like fins.
Where all your four fingers are all together, right? So, and the reason why they had that was because they used to dig with their hands. When they had to plow a field, they didn't have any tools. They used their hands to plow. When Noach was born, they saw his fingers were separated. He had 5 fingers on each hand. He had 10 fingers. And wow, this is unique. This is different. And they realized that he perhaps will figure a new way of how to plow the field. And he did. He came up with tools like shovels, right? Something unique, something different that the people did not think of, how to take metal and to form it in a certain way. Or maybe it wasn't metal, it's wood, whatever it's made out of. But he brought some relief. But truthfully, it wasn't just that type of relief. He brought relief because he was a righteous man. He was something unique. He went against the flow. And that's really the opening of the Parsha, where it says, Noach ish tzaddik tamim haya b'dairesav. Noach was a righteous man. He was perfectly righteous in his generation. He was different. In his generation, in his time, people already became extremely corrupt. There was a lot of robbery. There was a lot of theft. There was a lot of fighting, a lack of unity, and a lack of honesty. And Noach was different. Noach was just a righteous person, right, doing the right thing. And Hashem, it came a point where Hashem says, this got to a point where it's so bad, we got to bring a flood. Right? We know the story. God brings a flood. Noach is saved. He builds himself a teva, an ark, where he and 2 of each species of animals are saved. And the story of the flood. Last year I believe we spoke in great length. What was the purpose of the flood? That it was really not just to save and to punish those who have done wrong, but it was really about refining the world and changing the world. As we said, creation 2.0, where we started again from anew. But I wanted to just focus a little bit on the actual ark that Noach built, the teva as we refer to it in Hebrew, and the uniqueness of it and the significance in our life today, the idea of the teva that we also have to enter into our own little teva. Before we get to that, I'm sure, just like I'm sure you know different than everyone else, that this past week Perhaps you didn't get a lot of sleep. You're thinking about the atrocities that happened in Israel, following the news, hearing the news come out, hearing the stories of the survivors, and just kind of living with that, which is obviously painful and difficult. So interestingly, in this week's Parsha, there is some hints to some of the things that we're talking about now. Besides that, the name Hamas is actually mentioned in this week's Parsha, which Hamas actually means robbery, means theft, which is actually mentioned in this week's Parsha. But I want to kind of jump towards the end of the Parsha, where it kind of already mentioned something which is mentioned again later in the Torah, the borders of Israel, right? Because obviously that's the big topic of discussion now, of what are the borders of Israel. And in this week's Parsha, which seemingly is talking about the story of Noach, which has nothing to do with the story of Israel, the story of Israel only begins next week, where God instructs Abraham to go to the Lech Lecha, to go to the land that I will show you, to go to the land of Canaan, to go to the land of Israel. In this week's Parsha, we also have a quick mention of that. And if you have a Chumash in front of you, we could turn to page 60. We are in chapter, what is this? Chapter 10 and verse 19. So this is towards the end of the Parsha, where the Torah starts to talk about the descendants of Noach, and it talks a little bit about where they lived, where they all spread out. They weren't all living at exactly the same place. So one of the descendants of Noach was a man by the name of Canaan, right? Canaan was the son of Ham, which means he was the grandson of Noach. And Canaan, as we know later, became a large nation, the Canaanites and the land of Canaan. So it talks about the families of Canaan. They went out, they spread out, they started living in places. And where did they live? In the land of Canaan. What was the land of Canaan? So the Torah actually gives us the borders of this land of Canaan, which later became land of Israel, because God gave us a land of Canaan. So in verse 19, what does it say? It says, Vayihi Gvula Kanani, and it was the border of Kanani, the land of Canaan, the Canaanites, was from Sidon, which, by the way, Sidon is the place today in southern Lebanon. Sidon. Boyach al Gerara, going down all the way to Gerar, Ad Aza. Until where? Until Gaza. So Aza, in Hebrew, or in English, Gaza, was included in the borders of Canaan, which was later given to the Jewish people. So here we have probably the first mention of this strip of land, which is obviously a big controversy today, who exactly is the rightful owners to it. But it's already mentioned in the Torah, right at the beginning of the Torah, in Parsha Noach, that this was the borders of the land of Canaan, and obviously later was given to the Jewish people. Okay, well, let me go back to the story of the Teva, the story of God commanding Noach to build this Teva. There's a lot of interesting things about this Teva, about this ark. I want to first read a few verses inside. So let's start from verse 13. So we are on page 40, 41 in the Gutnik Chumash. We are in chapter 6, verse 13. Chapter 6, verse 13 of Bereshis, of Genesis, Parsha of Noach. Vayomer Elokim leNoach. God speaks to Noach and he says, Kates kol basar bo lefanai. The end of all flesh has come before me. This is too much for me to handle already. Ki mola ha'aretz chomas mipneihem. The earth has become filled with robbery. Which means even though they weren't only sinning with robbery, there were other crimes as well. But this is really what was the last the straw on their camel's back. This was the worst. The fact that there was so much a lack of unity. Later in the Tower of Babel over there was unity. They were fighting against God, but at least they were united. But here, the fact that they were fighting with each other, that itself was that was the worst thing of all, and that really was what caused this actual decree to come forward with destroying the world. I'm going to destroy them from the earth. That's it. Done with them. And what does he tell Noach to do? Verse 14. Asay lecha tevas atse goifer. Make for yourself an ark of atse goifer, gopher wood. Kinim taseh esa teva. You should make the ark with compartments. V'chafarta oisa mibayis u'michutz ba'koifer. You should coat both inside and outside with tar. Obviously, you want to make sure it floats. The water doesn't get in. There's no leaks. There's no floods, and so you got to coat it from inside and outside. So he talks about this. He refers to it as a teva. This teva we translate it as an ark. Make this ark for yourself. Now, interestingly, you know how long it took him to make this ark? This ark took him actually 120 years. Not days, not weeks, not months. 120 years to build this ark. You may think, wow, this must be a real sophisticated piece of work. A long time, right? How long does it take to build a ship? How long does it take to build a cruise? How long does it take right? You can think, wow, what sophistication. What was it? Well, let's look at verse 15. This is how you should make it. Shloish meis amos oirech. It should be 300 amma the length. 300 amma the length is roughly somewhere between 450 and 600 feet. That's the length of it. Which, by the way, is not that small. It's not such a small ship, right? A ship, 500 feet. I think a cruise, a big cruise, maybe 800 feet, 1,000 feet.
Football field, 300 feet.
A football field is
300 feet.
300 feet. You're talking about almost it's a 200 football field. This is a nice size, nice size ship. Okay, 300 feet length, 300 amma length, and 50 amma rach, but the width should be 50 amma, so roughly let's say 75 to 100 feet width. Ushleishim amma kemasa, and 30 amma is the height, the depth, the height, right? And the height, we said, also had three floors or 3 stories, right? And that's verse 16. Soyhar tasala teva. You should make a light for the ark. A light in the ark. How do they have? They had electricity then. What's this light that they had in the ark? A fire burning in a wooden ark. I don't know if that's so smart. Tar. So there's actually 2 opinions of what this light is referring to. Some say it means simply a window. That's all you need, a little window. That brings in light, right? You don't want to have a dark ark day and night, right? You want to have some light, so you make sure to add some windows or a window. The other opinion is that there was actually a gem, a certain type of stone that was bringing on light. That was perhaps it's both. Perhaps it's a window and a stone. But either way, make sure you don't forget about the lights. You should finish it a little amma on the top. Basically, talking about different types of roofs, right? Don't build it a flat roof because I'm expecting a lot of rain, right? So it should be on a pitch, it should be on a slant, right? As we have our roofs today. Don't build a flat roof. That's not smart, right? So make sure the top of it is just the width of 1 cubit or 1 amma. So the rest of it is on a slant. Don't forget to build an entrance, right? So on the side of it should be an opening, an entrance. And then it says, Tachtim, Shnim, Ushlishim Taseha, you should make it 3 floors. The bottom floor, the second and the third story, which we know later, the bottom was basically where all the garbage was, and the second floor was where all the animals were, and the top floor where all the humans, all the Noach and his family, they were living on the top floor. Okay. And then he continues saying that he's going to bring a mabul, going to bring this flood, going to destroy all life on this world, and I'm going to build my covenant with you. You're going to be the one that you're going to restart humanity, and you should also take from the animals, right? And that's exactly what Noach has done. Okay, so that is the story of the instruction that God gives Noach to make for himself, to create, to build this ark. Now, I want to go back to this idea. How long did it take him to make this ark? And really, 120 years, right? So one of the questions that come up when we think about these verses is, first of all, why did God have to ask Noach to build this ark to save himself, right? I mean, this whole flood was obviously miraculous, right? God brought this flood. It was water from above, water from below. I mean, it was something out of the ordinary. It wasn't a natural phenomenon. So there's a lot of ways to save Noah. Obviously, building an ark, it perhaps is one way, but there are many other ways. What's the significance of specifically building an ark? And more, another question, which is a little more of a question about, language, is why do we refer to this as a teva? The word teva, you know where else we find the word teva? Who has put in a little basket?
No.
Later on?
Moses.
Moses, exactly. Moshe, right? Moshe was put in a teva. He was put in a basket. When we use the word teva, the teva usually connotes a small little box, a small little basket. That's a teva. You know how we refer to a large ark, a large ship? In Hebrew, we have the word oniyah, which actually in modern Hebrew is used as well. But in ancient Hebrew, it's also used. The Torah uses that with other ships. It says Zevulun, right? One of the 12 tribes. He was involved with business. He would travel, and he was always going on oniyot, on these large ships. So the Torah uses other words to describe ships. This teva was far from a basket, right? As we said, it was 2 football fields. It was large. It was made out of wood, 3 floors. I mean, it was a serious deal, right? The way you had species from, animals from all species of animals there. I mean, it wasn't a little basket, something serious. Why do we refer to it as a teva, which seems to be like a little ship, a little boat, a little kayak, a little whatever, something floating on the water? That's not what it was. It was something serious. It was a ship.
It's what it contained, his precious, the beginnings of his humanity. He's making it happen again. So it's very special. It's very precious.
It's extremely special. But why the word teva? Right? The Hebrew word teva really means something, usually something small, something insignificant. So going to the first question, that's a good point, Dina. It was definitely very special. Going to the first question, why did he want him specifically to build something like this? So Rashi actually here talks about the idea, and this also ties into why it took him so long. 120 years is a full life for us. But you remember, in those days, as you see from the Torah, people were living hundreds of years. Noach was 500 years old when this whole story happened. I mean, people live for many, many years. There's a reason why God shortened our life, because people were wasting it, right? Imagine you're living for 700 years, and they say, okay, I got to do something about this. Give me in 50 years, I'll do it, right? Because you have so many years to waste. So what God realized is that if we cut down our life to 120 years instead of 900 years, we can we can be as productive in this short time, because we don't waste as much time, because we know life is short. So don't waste it. If I know I have hundreds of years to live, why would I do it tomorrow? What was a sign I once saw in someone's store? Don't push off to tomorrow what you can push off to after tomorrow.
To after tomorrow.
Right? Don't push off to tomorrow what you can push off to after tomorrow. Because we got time. What's the rush? Right? That was the motto of those who living for 800 years. I can do it in a week. I can do it in a year. I can do it in 20 years. What's going to happen? Right? I have so much time on my hand. That was the problem, right? That's why we cut it down shorter. But so 120 years was just a small percentage of his life. But the point is, it's still a long time, right? How long does it take? Ultimately, yes, it was a large ark. And some say, listen, Noach had to build it himself. He had to schlep. He had to chop down all the trees. He got to cut them to size. You got to work on it. You got to schlep it and nail it. It took a long time. Okay, I mean, at the end of the day, 120 years sounds it sounds a little bit too long to say it took him this long. So Rashi says something interesting. He says it was by design. It took him that long by design because, and this is also why he wanted him specifically to build an ark, because he wanted to visualize this to his community, to his generation. People should walk by and say, "Hey, Noah, what are you building there?" Noah would say, "Oh, you didn't hear? You didn't hear the news? God is bringing a flood. God is extremely upset with what's going on over here. We're so corrupt. We got to change our ways. We got to repent." Really? Wow. When they saw that visual for 120 years, people would come by Noah's house and they saw him building this ark. He couldn't hide it. It was a large ark. Everyone knew that Noach is talking about this flood that's going to come because our ways are wrong. Our ways are corrupt. So God wanted this, that people could see this and take it to heart. Now, did it work? Unfortunately not. Noach was not able to influence not one person. But at least he tried. At least he tried. So that's one of the reasons why God wanted him specifically to build an ark, and it took him for this long. Which is interesting because we don't find this with anything else. We don't find it in other areas. We don't find that when Jeremiah came to the Jewish people, warning them that if you don't repent, God will destroy the temple. He didn't come with a miniature temple and say, "Hey, look, if you don't listen, this is going to be destroyed," right? We don't always use visuals. But here, for some reason, God wanted Noah to use a visual. Maybe it failed. It didn't work. So we no reason to try it again. I don't know. But the Baal Shem Tov, the holy Baal Shem Tov, take this to a whole new level. He says, you have to understand that everything in the Torah has layers of meaning. There is the literal understanding, and then there is the esoteric, the deeper understanding. And so there's a whole new level of understanding to this story of the Teva. And that is why we refer to it as the word Teva. Teva means something, a little basket. But no, the word Teva is so important to understand the idea of what this ark is. And not only in the times of Noach with the flood of the waters, but in each and every one of our lives today. We are all going through this flood. We're all living in this flood. What's this flood? The waters of the world around us. The waters that try to drown us. All the thoughts and all the influences around us that try to drag us down. Like we have the expression, my head above water, right? I'm treading water over here. I'm trying to get through life, but there's so much raging waters around me that's so difficult. It's pulling me in, it's pulling me down. We just celebrated a month of holidays, and it was a great month. Started off on a high with Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Sukkot was great. Unfortunately, we had such a clap, such a hit on the last day of the holiday, which was extremely, extremely difficult. And ultimately, it's holidays. We're dancing with the Torahs. We're in synagogue. We're studying. We're praying. It's great. And then we end the holidays and we go back into the world around us, whether it is our jobs, our life, where sometimes we feel like I'm barely making it. You have these raging waters that are pulling me in. That's the flood in our lives. And sometimes we feel like we're drowning. How do I stay above water? How do I stay focused? And here is where the Torah says, Noach, build for yourself a teva. We don't use the word oniyah. We don't use a big, mighty ship. A teva. The word teva has more than one meaning. In Hebrew, teva could be an ark. Teva could also mean a word. Teva means a letter or word. In Hebrew today, even modern Hebrew. Teva means words, letters. You know what the Baal Shem Tov says? Something powerful. He says, you know how you save yourself from your flood, from the waters around you? Go into the Teva. dive into the words of the Torah. Study Torah. The words of the Torah are your ark protection from these waters. Interestingly, the measurements of the Teva, which we said was 300 length, 50 width, and 30 height. Each thing has a numerical value, right? So the letter for 30 is Lamed, the letter for 300 is Shin, and the letter for 50 is Nun. In Hebrew, that spells out a word, Lashon. Lashon means language, speaking, talking, tongue. The idea of a teva is the words of Torah. And we all know that when we speak something, when we say something, it brings out something very deep within us, our emotions. We get very much involved, right? We could think about something. And I know this just with me. I know personally with this past week, which you're reading, you're listening, you're hearing news from Israel. But when you speak about it, when you hear a story of a survivor, or unfortunately a story of someone who did not survive, you read it. It's emotional. It's difficult. But when you tell it over, suddenly you start to cheer up. What happened? Nothing new. I knew the story the whole time, but because I'm speaking the words, I get more involved in it. It touches home. It gets more internalized. It means something closer to heart because I'm verbalizing it. And the same is true with the words of Torah. We know so much of Torah, but when we sit down with an open book and we study Torah, we get so much more involved. And that's the protection that we need. Yeah. That's something that we need every single day, because these raging waters are all around us. We get sucked in, whether it is the news, whether it is an unhealthy relationship with a coworker, or whether it is just the worries of the world. What will be? How am I going to make it? And I can't focus in life. Study some Torah. It's a protection. It's an oasis. It brings us that peace that we need, because that's what, when we study these words, we fully get engaged in these words, and we're very much present in these words, and this is what saves us. When I was in about a year ago, I was in Washington D.C. for a conference. Celebrating the Rebbe's birthday, so they had like a little thing in Washington with various senators and people like that. For the day. So one of the guest speakers was Sharansky. He's in Israel today. He was actually, I met him. He was standing on the side of the street, like, "Hey, we took a selfie together." But he has an amazing story, a fascinating story. He was a refusenik in Russia, and he was married to his wife Avital, and the day after his marriage, his wife already had a visa and she had tickets to leave Russia. And so they got married, and the next day she left. And about 2 or 3 years later, because he became a strong refusenik and he was really demonstrating against the government, the communist government, so he was imprisoned. He was arrested and sent to prison. But right before that, he got a friend of his gave him a gift, a package that his wife sent, I believe from Israel, sent him. And what was in that package? One of the things that was in that package was a small pocket-sized Tehillim, a book of Psalms. He wasn't religious at the time. He wasn't religious. He didn't even know how to read Hebrew or to understand Hebrew. But just seeing the Tehillim really gave him like a little, courage. So he was imprisoned, and they took away his stuff, including the Tehillim. But he begged them, "Please give me that little Tehillim." And eventually, they gave it back to him. And later he would say, and I actually just heard this literally maybe 2 weeks ago on a podcast. He was being interviewed. And he repeated the story, even though I'm sure he said the story many times. He said he started reading Tehillim, and it brought like a calmness to him. Even though he didn't understand a word of Tehillim, perhaps he was even reading it with mistakes. I'm not sure how fluent he was in reading Hebrew. But he said what would he do every day? He would just stare at that Tehillim and just try to figure out the meaning. And he was a smart man. So based on, I'm not even sure how, reading a lot of Tehillim, he started to make out some words and to understand some of the Hebrew. And he said the first verse that he was able to completely understand from beginning to end was a verse in chapter, I believe, 23, which the verse is, even when I walk in the shadow of death, I do not fear because you are with me. Gam ki elech begates hamavis, lo iroro ki atzimod. That was the first verse that he fully, understood, and that obviously gave him so much koyach, so much strength, encouragement during those dark moments in his life. When we enter into the teva, we enter into the ark, the words of Torah. This is what gives solence. This is what protects us, and that is what the Baal Shem Tov tells us about this story. So, like I said, many layers to the stories of the Torah. Noach had to build an ark. It was a physical ark, large ship made out of wood that protected him from the actual floods. But this also means in our lives as well. We refer to it as a teva, not a ship, because teva means words. We also have to build this little ship. It's built already. It's on the shelf. It's in the bookstore. It's on the internet. It's accessible. Bring home that little teva to your home. Spend a few minutes every day, whether a few minutes in the morning to start your day on the right foot, a few minutes at night before we go to bed. Study some Torah. Enter into that teva, and through that protects us from everything else that goes on in our lives throughout the day. And of course, thinking about Israel at this moment, obviously what we do today affects what's going on in Israel. And each and every one of us, in addition to sending donations and funds and everything I have to do for Israel, we also have to connect with God and add in prayer and add in Torah studies. Each and every one of us, when we say a prayer and when we study Torah, and we say we're studying Torah, and this is both in memory of those who have lost their life, and this is to give strength to those who are fighting to protect our brothers and sisters in Israel. This is to give hope and heal and to give health to those who are injured and fighting for their lives in Israel. When we study some Torah, we enter into this ark. It helps us and it helps our brothers and sisters in Israel. So let's make that resolution that we should add in going into this ark, add in Torah study, add in prayer, and we should only hear good news in our lives and only good news out of Israel. So I leave you with that. Thank you for joining us. Have a Shavua Tov and a Chodesh Tov. I forgot to mention today is Rosh Chodesh. So today is also the beginning of a new month. So we have a Chodesh Tov, a Shavua Tov. I also wanted to mention that for this month, unfortunately, one of the 1,300 plus casualties in Israel was two of our community members' cousin. Her name was Stav. Forget her mother's name. But she unfortunately was at this festival. She was killed, and the classes in this month are dedicated to her memory. Her memory for a blessing. May God send condolences and strength for her family, of Stav's family and all the family, many families in Israel, unfortunately, who are sitting Shiva at this moment. I'll leave you with
grandniece in the army and two nephews that are guarding the border.